"I'd like to make a toast," Ryan announced, raising his glass as everyone at his housewarming party turned to look at him. His eyes gleamed with excitement, an expression I'd seen countless times when he was about to steal the spotlight. "To new beginnings, new homes, and—" He paused dramatically to Grandpa's memory. A respectful silence fell over the room. Our grandfather had passed away just 4 days ago, and the wound was still fresh for all of us. I raised my glass along with everyone else, quietly honoring the man who had meant so much to me. "Speaking of Grandpa," Ryan continued, setting his drink down on the coffee table, "I have an announcement to make." I watched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, slightly worn at the edges. My heart skipped a beat. There was something about the way he glanced at me that made me uneasy. "Before he died, Grandpa gave me this letter," Ryan said, his voice carrying across the living room of his new Denver home. "He wanted me to have his vacation home by the lake, the place we all loved as kids." The room erupted in surprised murmurs and congratulations. My parents beamed with pride while Ryan's girlfriend, Melissa, clapped excitedly. My cousin Samantha shot me a confused look from across the room. She knew how close Grandpa and I had been. I sat stunned, unable to process what I was hearing. The lakeside cabin was Grandpa's most cherished possession. It was also the place where I had spent nearly every weekend for the past 3 years, helping him maintain the property, listening to his stories, and simply enjoying his company. Ryan, on the other hand, had visited maybe twice in the last 5 years, always complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi and nothing to do. But more importantly, Grandpa had given me a small wooden box 3 weeks ago, making me promise not to open it until the time was right. Inside was a notarized deed transferring ownership of the vacation home to me. He had already given me the property. It wasn't even part of his estate. As Ryan unfolded the letter and began to read what was supposedly Grandpa's wishes, I studied his face. Was he lying? Did he know about the deed? Had Grandpa somehow changed his mind without telling me? "That's great. Good for you, Ryan," I managed to say with a forced smile, though my mind was racing. I needed to get home and check the documents in that wooden box right away. I quietly excused myself, saying I needed to use the bathroom, and slipped away from the celebration. As I closed the bathroom door behind me, I leaned against it and took a deep breath. The letter Ryan had shown everyone didn't make sense. Grandpa's handwriting had become increasingly shaky in his final months due to arthritis, but the signature I glimpsed looked suspiciously smooth and confident. My phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. "You okay?" That was weird. Ryan never even cared about the cabin. I texted back, "Need to check something at home. Can you cover for me? Say I got called into work." Within minutes, she had made my excuses to the family, and I slipped out the back door while everyone was still fawning over Ryan's inheritance. The drive to my apartment felt surreal. Streetlights blurred as memories of Grandpa flooded my mind, teaching me to fish off the dock, pointing out constellations in the clear mountain sky, and laughing at my terrible attempts to skip stones across the lake. The vacation home wasn't just property. It was where our most precious memories lived. It was our special place, where Grandpa had taught me about resilience, patience, and finding joy in simple things. Ryan had never shown any interest in those lessons, or the cabin itself. His announcement felt like a violation of something sacred. As soon as I got home, I went straight to my closet and retrieved the wooden box Grandpa had given me. It was his old cigar box, worn smooth with age, the cedar still fragrant when I opened it. "Don't open this until you need to know the truth," he had told me, his eyes crinkling with that familiar wisdom that suggested he knew more than he was saying. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay several neatly folded documents, a sealed envelope with my name written on it, and a small brass key I recognized immediately. It opened the antique roll-top desk in Grandpa's study at the cabin. I unfolded the top document and gasped. It was exactly as I remembered, a notarized deed transferring ownership of the vacation home to me, dated 6 months ago. Alongside it was a letter in Grandpa's unmistakably shaky handwriting. "My dearest Olivia, by the time you read this, I'll likely be gone. I've decided to give you the cabin while I'm still alive to avoid any complications. You're the only one who truly loved this place as much as I did. Your brother never showed interest, except when he needed a place to host parties when I wasn't around." Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. "I know your brother might contest this, which is why I've had everything properly notarized and filed. There's a copy with my lawyer, Harold Thompson. The cabin is legally yours already. This isn't part of my will or estate. I trust you to honor the spirit of our special place. I sat back, stunned. Ryan had lied. He had fabricated a letter, knowing full well Grandpa had already given the property to me. The audacity was breathtaking even for him. My phone buzzed with messages from my parents, asking where I'd gone. Ryan had texted too. Nice disappearing act. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin if you ask nicely. That's when I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't confront him via text or phone. No, this called for something more direct. I gathered the documents, tucked them back into the box, and checked the time. The party would still be going for a couple more hours. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and headed back to my car. It was time for the truth to come out. The drive back to Ryan's house gave me time to think. I wasn't going to cause a scene. That wasn't my style, and certainly not what Grandpa would have wanted. He had always told me that when you have the truth on your side, you don't need to shout it from the rooftops. The quiet truth hits harder than any loud lie. I parked a block away from Ryan's house, the wooden box secure on the passenger seat beside me. For a moment, I just sat there, gathering my courage. I thought about all the weekends I'd spent with Grandpa at the cabin while Ryan was too busy to visit. I remembered how Grandpa's face would light up when I arrived, how we'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing on the porch swing. "What would you do, Grandpa?" I whispered, running my fingers over the box's smooth surface. The answer came almost immediately in my mind: the right thing. With grace. I decided not to go back into the party right away. Instead, I texted Samantha. "How many people are still there?" She replied quickly, "Just family now. Most guests left after dinner. Are you coming back?" This was perfect. I didn't want a crowd for what I needed to do. I took the box and walked the short distance to Ryan's front door. When I knocked, it was Ryan himself who answered. His expression shifted from surprise to weariness. "Work emergency over already?" he asked, his tone suggesting he didn't believe there had been one in the first place. "We need to talk, Ryan," I said calmly, stepping past him into the house. It was time for the truth. As I stepped into Ryan's living room, all eyes turned toward me. My parents sat on the couch, my mother clutching a glass of wine while my father examined the letter Ryan had presented earlier. Melissa perched on the armrest beside him, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Samantha, sitting quietly in the corner, gave me a knowing look. "Olivia is back," my mother announced unnecessarily, forcing a smile. "We were just discussing Ryan's wonderful news about the cabin." I set the wooden box down on the coffee table. "That's actually what I wanted to talk about." Ryan's eyes locked onto the box, recognition flickering across his face. "What's that?" he asked, though I could tell he already had a good idea. "Something Grandpa gave me 3 weeks ago," I said, keeping my voice level. "He asked me not to open it until the time was right." I looked directly at Ryan. "I think that time is now." Before he could protest, my father leaned forward with interest. "What is it, Olivia?" I opened the box and carefully removed the notarized deed and Grandpa's letter. 6 months ago, Grandpa legally transferred ownership of the vacation home to me, I said, laying the documents on the table for everyone to see. "It's already mine. It's not part of his estate or will." Silence fell over the room. My mother's mouth dropped open while my father picked up the deed with a furrowed brow. Ryan stood frozen, his face draining of color. "This is notarized," my father confirmed, flipping through the pages. "And this is definitely your grandfather's signature." "That's impossible," Ryan sputtered. "Grandpa gave me the letter. He wanted me to have the cabin." "May I see that letter again?" I asked, extending my hand toward my father. He handed it over, and I placed it side by side with Grandpa's handwritten letter from my box. The difference was stark. The handwriting on Ryan's letter was an attempt at imitation, but it lacked the telltale shakiness caused by Grandpa's arthritis. The signature was too perfect, too controlled. My mother turned to Ryan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you forge this letter?" His silence was answer enough. The room remained heavy with tension as Ryan struggled for words. Finally, he blurted out, "You don't understand. It's not fair that she gets everything." I blinked. "Everything? What are you talking about?" "You were always Grandpa's favorite," he said, his words rushing out like water through a broken dam. "Always visiting him, always helping him, always the perfect grandchild. The rest of us barely got a look in." My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Ryan, regardless of how you feel, forging your grandfather's signature is serious. My mother reached for both letters, comparing them side by side. Her expression shifted from disbelief to disappointment. "Oh, Ryan, how could you do this?" Melissa slowly stood up, her face pale. "I think I should go," she murmured, avoiding Ryan's pleading look as she gathered her purse and headed for the door. "Wait, Melissa. This isn't what it looks like." Ryan called after her, but she was already gone. The room fell silent again. Samantha caught my eye and gave me a small, supportive nod. She had always seen through Ryan's antics, even when our parents couldn't. "I don't understand," my father said finally, turning to Ryan. "Why would you announce something like this without even checking if it was true? The will reading isn't until next week." Ryan's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I found out about the deed," he admitted. "I was at Grandpa's lawyer's office last week asking about the estate, and Mr. Thompson mentioned that the cabin wasn't part of it because it had already been taken care of. He wouldn't tell me more because of client confidentiality, but I knew what it meant. I just thought." His voice faltered. "You thought if you announced it first, everyone would believe you instead of me." I finished for him. His shoulders slumped. "Yeah, maybe." "Maybe what?" my mother pressed. Ryan hesitated, his voice quieter now. "Maybe if I had the cabin, it would make up for all the time I didn't spend there. Like I could somehow buy back those moments I missed." My anger softened just a fraction. For the first time, I saw something beneath Ryan's arrogance, regret. But that didn't change what he had done. "You could have had those moments," I said. "Grandpa invited you to the cabin countless times. You always said you were too busy." "Because I felt like an intruder," he shot back. "By the time I realized what I was missing, it was too late. You two had your special bond, your inside jokes, your traditions. There was no room for me." My father shook his head, disappointment evident in his expression. "That doesn't justify lying to the entire family, son." Ryan sank into a chair, the fight draining out of him. "So what happens now?" he asked, not looking at any of us. "You've made your point, Olivia. You win." "This isn't about winning," I said, thinking of Grandpa and what he would want in this moment. Despite Ryan's deception, he was still my brother, and Grandpa had loved him too, in his own way. I reached back into the wooden box and pulled out something I hadn't mentioned yet, a sealed envelope with Ryan's name on it, written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. "He left something for you too," I said, holding it out to him. Ryan looked up, suspicion and hope warring in his expression. "What is it?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "Grandpa told me not to open anything that wasn't addressed to me." After a moment's hesitation, Ryan took the envelope and carefully opened it. As he read the contents, his expression shifted from defensive to shocked and finally to something that looked like genuine remorse. "He knew," Ryan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "He knew I might try to claim the cabin." "What does it say, honey?" my mother asked gently. Ryan hesitated, then handed her the letter. "Read it," he said. "Everyone should hear it." She adjusted her glasses and began. "Dear Ryan, if you're reading this, then Olivia has opened my cedar box, which means one of two things. Either I'm gone, or something has happened that made her feel it was necessary to reveal its contents. I've known you since the day you were born, and I know your heart. You've always wanted recognition and validation, things I perhaps failed to give you in the way you needed. But I also know that when you feel overlooked, you sometimes make impulsive decisions that hurt others and, ultimately, yourself. The cabin has been transferred to Olivia. This was a decision I made with great thought and love, not because I didn't care for you, but because Olivia connected with the place in a way you never did. She understood what made it special to me, and I trust her to preserve that spirit. What you need isn't a property, Ryan. It's a purpose. I've enclosed a check for $25,000. Use it to start something meaningful. Find what makes your heart come alive the way the cabin does for Olivia." When my mother finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Ryan sat with his head bowed, the check clutched in his trembling hand. For the first time in years, I saw my brother not as my rival, but as someone just as lost as I had once been. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Thank you for watching.